There's another congressman, a Republican, Joe Barton. He's apologizing over a lewd photo that got out there.
That's right. He is apologizing. And this all stems from an anonymous tweet which showed a new photo that the user claimed online was of Congressman Barton. Now, Barton is apologizing tonight. He says in a statement, quote, "While separated from my second wife prior to the divorce, I had sexual relationships with other mature adult women. Each was consensual. Those relationships have ended. I am sorry. I did not use better judgment during those days. I am sorry that I let my constituents down." And just to emphasize here, there is no allegations of sexual harassment here, but certainly very embarrassing for a sitting member of Congress to have these photos out there.
Salman Safadi, thanks very much. There is breaking news tonight. CNN has learned that Attorney General Jeff Sessions is ordering the ATF and the FBI to do a comprehensive review of the national database that houses gun background checks. CNN Justice reporter Laura Jarrett, she's been working that story for us. Laura, this in response to the church shooting in Texas that left more than 24 people dead because he had crimes that were not properly entered into that database.
That's right, Jim. Attorney General Jeff Sessions is taking the first step today to ensure those with violent criminal records no longer fall through the cracks when it comes to buying a gun, calling the breakdowns in the system today alarming and unacceptable. Sessions specifically directs the head of the FBI and the ATF to work with the Defense Department to make sure all convictions are now properly entered in what's called the National Instant Criminal Background Check System, otherwise known as NICS. Now, as you mentioned, the timing here is no coincidence, as that mass shooting of churchgoers in Texas earlier this month showed how someone with a criminal record of domestic abuse was still able to buy a gun because the Air Force failed to enter his information in the federal database. Lawmakers on Capitol Hill have also taken note of the problems and the breakdowns in the system here. And last week, a bipartisan group of senators announced a bill to ensure that states and federal authorities all upload the required information to the database from now on, Jim.
Yeah, well, you'd think that'd be a no-brainer. Laura Jarrett, thanks very much. Let's get more on all this with Democratic Congressman John Garamendi of California. As a member of the Armed Services Committee, Congressman Garamendi, thanks for taking the time during this holiday week. It's good to have you on.
It's good to be with you, Jim, and what a week it's been.
No question. Well, you just heard Laura Jarrett's reporting their decision by Attorney General Sessions. I mean, not a new law, really reviewing an existing database that should have worked in advance of this shooting here. But do you see this as a substantive review that could save lives?
Well, the review is very, very necessary, although I'm not sure I trust Sessions. I'm thinking he may want to take a whole lot of people off the database, as well as make sure some people get on the database. We do know that there's clearly a problem with the military. They simply, over the last decade, maybe almost more than that, have not provided information into that database when appropriate. The kind of thing that we saw in Texas is terrible, but nonetheless, all of the military failed to do their duty to put those names of people that domestic violence, other kinds of crimes into the database. That has been a subject in our hearings, and we need to make sure that the military does its duty here and carries out this particular responsibility.
But before the Texas shooting, of course, we had the horrific shooting in Las Vegas, more than 50 killed there. There was a lot of talk about bump stocks after that, even from Republican lawmakers, but that seems to have died on the vine. Is there still any talk about banning bump stocks, which basically turn semi-automatic weapons into automatic weapons?
I'm afraid not. It's a tragic situation. We stand up, we hear a moment of silence, prayer, almost every week now, and yet the legislation that could help bump stocks, other kinds of legislation to get these very, very dangerous guns out of the public hands just doesn't happen. There's been no legislation at all. Even do not fly, cannot buy. Even that didn't pass the Congress. And it's a terrible situation. The Republicans refuse to allow any gun safety legislation to come to the floor for a vote.
Yeah, the one you referenced there, in case viewers didn't recognize, it's for people on the no-fly list for terror danger, not being able to buy a weapon. I want to turn, if I can, to the president's tweets this morning. I'm sure you're aware of them right now, but calling LeVar Ball an ungrateful fool, calling him a poor man's Don King without the hair. As you read a tweet like this, do you see dog whistling here?
Absolutely. There is no doubt. he's been going after African Americans in many, many ways, and minorities generally. In fact, he started his campaign for president going after minorities. In that case, Mexican nationals here in the United States, as well as Mexican people of Mexican origin that have been here forever. Took on a federal judge. It goes on and on and on, one minority after another. And right now he's focusing on the African Americans, obviously the football players who are protesting by not standing for the national anthem. Protest is a tradition in America, but yet the president seems to be focused basically now on African Americans, previously on others.
Turning to another topic, we're learning more about the allegations against your fellow Congressman Conyers. Do you believe that, based on what you know now, that he should resign not only from his position as ranking member on the Judiciary Committee, but do you think he should resign from his seat in Congress?
Well, I really don't know. I've been on the outside of the information. We're going to be back in session Tuesday of next week, and all of this information should be made available to us. Should be full transparency of every allegation, every charge that has been made. And let's take a look at it very carefully at that point. I don't know all of the details. I do know John Conyers. He is, I'm frankly very, very surprised to hear all of this. But after 53 years in Congress, this is a terrible tragedy for him, and certainly even more so for those people that were affected by his actions.
You were aware of the attention yesterday to President Trump as to whether he believes the allegations against Roy Moore, Senate candidate in Alabama. In this case, do you believe the allegations against Congressman Conyers, the women's allegations against him?
Well, I think in every case, we must give credit to these allegations, wherever they may arise. In the case of President Trump, the allegations against him, yes, I do give those credits, give credibility to those. To Moore, yes. The accusers, we should always give them the benefit of the doubt, put the facts on the table, have a discussion, or in the case of an ethics investigation, and see what is truthful, what is not. But always, always, we must start with the basic assumption that the allegations are correct. And you simply can't wave them aside. Furthermore, we have to be held accountable. We're 435 members of Congress, 100 senators, and a president. We have a very, very unique and special obligation to be ethical and to have high ethical standards, to speak the truth, and to engage in ethical behavior in every way. Unfortunately, we have a president that wakes up at 5:30 in the morning and blasts a fellow who's talking about protecting his son. You go, what in the world is this president doing? If he's angry, wow. But that's a responsibility that he has to raise the level of his department.
Discourse.
Raise the level,
sure.
Discourse, absolutely. Thank you for that word.
I hear you on that. I had your Democratic colleague, Debbie Dingell, on a short time ago, and she herself has spoken on our air about being the victim, being the target of sexual harassment during her career. But she also raised her own concern about due process, about the possibility of false allegations, or giving a chance at least for the accused to respond. And I wonder, it seems like both parties are struggling with this question. I wonder if you have similar concerns.
Well, I do, and I think Representative Dingell is correct. We should give credibility to the accusations. That's the starting point. And we have to have a process that is open, transparent, and if the accusations in that process, in this case the Ethics Committee, dealing with it diligently and quickly, getting the information out there, not hiding anything, and if at the end of that investigation the answer is, yeah, somebody misbehaved, then what is the appropriate, where do you go from there? First of all, I don't think you ought to use taxpayer money to settle these claims. Ought to come out of the pockets of the, and if it's a representative, out of the pockets of a representative. If it's a chief of staff or someone else in the office, they ought to be held accountable in the same way. taxpayer money shouldn't be used. But the issue needs to be, first of all, credibility given to the accusation, and a process immediately underway. Certainly, Mr. Conyers, when we return next week, lay it out, put it out on the table. What did take place? What is the accusations? And if they are credible and if they're substantial, as they appear to be, then what is the appropriate action? And I'm quite sure that Mr. Conyers will do whatever is appropriate at that point.
Congressman, please stay with us. We have new information coming in.
Sure.
We're going to get right back to you right after this break.